Hello, welcome to Global Focus by Hari Sinha. I am your host, Hari Prakash Sinha. Let me start with a simple question. What does a war in West Asia have to do with the price you pay for petrol, food, or even airline tickets? Quite a lot, actually. On February 28, 2026, the United States, Israel, launched a major strike on Iran in what was called Operation Epic Fury. Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed, and Iran responded quickly by effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz. Now, this is not another geopolitical headline. About 20% of the world's oil and a large portion of global LNG shipment pass through the narrow waterway. Within days, we saw oil prices jump sharply. Qatar's LNG operation disrupted and the stock market in Asia fall dramatically. Some economists are already warning that if this situation continues, the world could see a starting of another global recession. So today, we are going to talk about the economics of war, how a military conflict thousands of kilometers away can shake the global economy and eventually reach your wallet. And joining me to unpack all this is Dr. Adityanjee, President of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Dr. Adityanjee, welcome back to Global Focus.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me again on your platform, Global Focus. We did another session discussing about this war in Iraq, but let's talk about economic consequences of this war.
Right.
Basically, geoeconomics and geopolitics are inseparable.
Yes, it is. So let's begin with the heart of the issue. Let us start with the Strait of Hormuz. People hear the name whenever tension rises in West Asia, but many don't fully understand why it is so critical to the global economy. Iran hasn't announced a formal blockade, yet markets are behaving as if one of the world's most important energy arteries has been shut. Why does even the threat of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz create such a massive economic reaction? What do you say?
I think people need to look at the map of the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is like, just 90 miles long. At its narrowest point, it is only 21 mile width.
I see.
And it connects the Persian Gulf to Gulf of Oman.
Yes.
And there are a number of countries that have to send their crude oil through tankers to the rest of the world. And those countries do include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Oman, UAE, all those countries. So a large proportion of world oil actually passes through Strait of Hormuz, and any kind of disturbance can lead to backlogs. It's an energy choke point.
Yeah. Okay.
You have already said how much oil comes, world supply through Strait of Hormuz. I'll make one correction here. Iran has not actually officially closed the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
What happened that, the insurance companies, these are called P&I clubs,
Okay.
protection and indemnity clubs. So you have a $100 million, $150 million worth of oil tanker.
Mm-hmm.
It has two sets of insurance. One is for its hull and platform or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And second type of insurance is for protection and indemnity from unusual happenings. And this kind of insurance is given to these tankers by certain clubs that operate on non-profit basis. So what happened that as soon as the war started, the tanker movement slowed down, and barely by March 1st, there was hardly any tanker movement. And P&I indemnity clubs, the insurance clubs, they dropped the insurance. They said, we will not insure the tanker movement because the war makes it too risky. And yes, Iran did attack some of the tankers. So there is a threat to these tankers from Iran. Iran has officially not closed, but IRGC has done some low frequency announcements that it's not safe to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has also said that, although tankers belonging to other countries may be affected, but they would allow Indian tankers to go through.
Yeah.
So that is a kind of anecdotal bit. But you have to see that, if you are China, how does that affect you? 80% of China's oil comes through Strait of Hormuz. So if there's no oil movement through Strait of Hormuz, the tanker movement, what will happen to Chinese oil supplies? Do they have strategic reserves to last for long? I'm pretty sure they have their strategic petroleum reserves, but how long they will last?
Yeah.
So China has been making appeals that we need to indulge in dialogue and discussion and diplomacy and let the oil flow continue. So this is how it affects China. Look at the US and West Europe. The, the price of Brent oil crude before the war was $70 per barrel. Now, in some markets, Brent crude oil price has gone up to $92 per barrel. In 7 days, $92 per barrel. And it may not stop here. If the war goes long, the Brent crude's price, they are saying, will go beyond 100, maybe $120 per barrel. So if crude oil prices go up, there goes up everything, like you were saying, airline tickets. Most of the transportation of goods, at least in US, is done by trucks, long distance trucks, which run on hydrocarbons. So if your day-to-day goods are being transported by hydrocarbons, by oil or variant of it, what happens? The prices of the essential commodities go up. Prices of any kind of transportation, whether that is transportation by airlines or transportation by surface, that will go up. Even the merchant shipping will be affected by the price of the fuel. You might have seen that because of the war, China put a ban on export of hydrocarbon products. Processed products, whether it's diesel or other hydrocarbon products, processed ones, China has ordered its refineries not to sell, not to export. And when the P&I clubs stopped giving insurance protections to oil tankers, US government had to step in. Yesterday, President Trump announced a $20 billion fund to provide insurance to these tankers. $20 billion through United States International Development Finances Corporation. Now, what is happening that the owners of the tankers are saying, no, thank you, we cannot rely on just this insurance because the safety risk is very
But
high.
can America provide such insurance in this period? Are they in the
Well, that is what they are doing. They are the superpower, and they have unlimited amount of bottomless pit of petrodollars because whenever they need more money, they can print. So yes, President Trump has, it's not can, they have already. President Trump has already announced yesterday $20 billion fund to provide insurance. So we are talking about Strait of Hormuz where tanker traffic has gone down to virtually zero. So if there's no energy coming out, and it's not just oil, it's also liquefied natural gas or liquefied petroleum gas, because some of these countries are selling liquefied petroleum gas. And I think Oman and probably UAE have said that we are stopping the production of liquefied petroleum gas because you cannot keep on accumulating. So you have to stop the production. And once you stop the production to reboot their plants, it will take a lot of time. Similarly, if the oil tankers are not going, there will be glut of supplies in the source countries like Saudi Arabia, like UAE. How much that glut they can store locally? They are saying that in 20 days their storage capacity will be fully consumed or fully occupied by the crude oil supplies. What will they have to do then? Then they will have to stop the production of the oil. Once you stop the production of the oils, you close the wells, to restart them will again bring more costs. So essentially, this war is going to have long-term repercussions on the world economy. And sitting here in US, I can tell you that already the prices of gas on the pump have increased, but the prices of commodities are also increasing in just 7 days of this war. And because the war is not just about the cost of oil, there is cost of war per se. United States is spending $1 billion per day on this war, and we can go into the specifics. Even to have their armada position, they had to spend like $680 million for each $35,000 to $50,000 worth of Shaheed drone that Iran is employing. They have to use an interceptor, which costs $4 million. So 35. In other words, US is spending a lot of money on the war effort. Somebody has at some point in time, and this is unbudgeted. So this will be the cost of war, and the estimates are that this war, depending on how long it continues, will cost US taxpayer anywhere from $100 billion to $240 billion. And Pentagon is already trying to make a supplemental request for $50 billion additional budget for contingency management. So we are in day 7. It does not appear that the war is likely to stop so soon. There is cost to everyone, not just to Israel and US and Iran. There are other countries where US has bases, they have been affected and their economy is getting affected. And ultimately, pretty much entire world economy because of dip in the energy supplies.
Right.
This forced the United States to quote unquote grant a waiver to India that whatever the ships, the tankers taking Russian oil are floating around, let them go to India so that they can be refined by Indian refineries and the oil prices are stabilized. It tells you the desperate measures United States government is taking. So basically they are eating a crow there.
So that connect to something else that is very important right now, inflation. Over the past 3 years, central banks around the world have been trying to bring inflation down. But if oil prices surge, Again, because of this war, doesn't that risk reigniting inflation globally? And if that happens, what kind of dilemma does it create for central banks like the US Federal Reserve?
Well, central banks can do whatever they can try to do. The war is not under their control. War is under control of the political leadership. And sometimes political leadership takes actions which are devoid of geo-economic rationale. In fact, what has been said that by the United States president that yes, the prices will go up, but eventually they will come down. Yes, there will be some inflation temporarily, but it will come down. So, if political leadership takes that kind of attitude, central banks, whichever country, they have very little wiggle room to do any intervention to reduce the inflation. Inflation is going to be there if this war goes to greater lengths. And right now it does not appear because despite decapitating the Islamic Republic of Iran's top leadership, US is not giving an indication that this war is over. In fact, there was a statement from President Trump that there will be something much bigger happening on Saturday. Iran will be hit hard. And if you look at the statement of Iran's president, uh, Pezeshkian, he has said that, United States wants total surrender. We are not going to surrender, but we apologize to our neighbors in the Gulf, Persian Gulf, that IRGC targeted some of their facilities. So you are in a totally uncharted territory. War is not predictable, it does not go according to the plan, and we will be surprised. So I think we are looking at a scenario where prolongation of this war will have a lot of downstream consequences, not just for the country that is the target of the war, not the countries that are the attackers in this war, but pretty much entire world because you have a very precious resource that is being affected, that is hydrocarbons, and pretty much every country's economy depends on oil and gas and hydrocarbons. And central bank intervention can control inflation at a cost for short period of time, but not for a long period of time. So we may get into a war-induced recession by the end of the year if this war goes long.
Another major development in this crisis was the drone strikes on Qatar LNG facilities, which forced shutdown. Europe has already gone through the energy crisis after reducing its dependence on Russian gas. How vulnerable Europe's energy system right now if LNG supplies from the Gulf start getting disrupted?
Well, the LNG supplies, again, they are to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, all the outflow, 84% from Strait of Hormuz goes to Asia, and only 14% goes then through Red Sea and then Suez Canal to Europe. But Europe is going to face a double whammy because Russian gas supply that has been closed because of closure of pipeline by Zelensky, and Zelensky is not giving any indication that he will allow repair of the pipeline that passes through Ukraine to the Europe. And of course, we all also know that in the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines were sabotaged, and everyone knows now who sabotaged that, although initially nobody claimed responsibility.
Mm.
So traditional supply of Russian, crude or gas, both of them actually to Europe have dwindled. and Europe is facing actually energy inflation for last 4 years. So it will be a double whammy. Europe is getting sandwiched for its, energy needs. So
Mm.
Europe will definitely be affected. The other country that will be affected in a major way would be China, because China had a 25 years, $400 billion partnership or agreement with Iran, for which 80% of Iranian oil production was going to go to China. Now, Iran may want to send it to China,
Yeah.
but if the war situation is such that no tanker is willing to transport the crude, there's nothing China can do. And yes, there is this BRI, Border uh, and Road Initiative,
Yeah.
but to send it through land will
Mm.
be prohibitively costly, and there are no direct pipelines between Iran and China. So China's economy will be hit hard, Europe's economy will be hit hard, even India's economy would be hit hard because India is not self-sufficient in hydrocarbons. India may come to an arrangement with Russian Federation and get Russian supplies. That's a different issue. But pretty much every other country's economy would be hit hard. Although United States is a net exporter of hydrocarbons over the last decade by drilling extra wells and by fracking and all that kind of thing, United States has become the largest producer of natural gas and crude. Even their economy would be affected because if the Brent, you are never insulated from international energy market. In fact, the supplies to US may not have been affected by this, but gas companies, oil companies, they are transnationals. So if Brent crude oil price goes up, the pump price goes up. So we are looking at maybe, suddenly from $2.80 for a 87 grade gas on the pump, it has become $3.50. And this will keep on increasing. So you are already seeing almost, you know, 20% inflation in gas prices. So what I'm trying to say that energy supply affects global economy, and it will not like affect one country more than the other. It may not affect Russian Federation because they are the one of the great producers
Yeah.
and they are solely impacted by domestic energy prices. But even for US, there will be a problem. Now we see that there is some sort of connection that you block Venezuelan oil supply to China, and now you have blocked Iranian oil supply to China. What is the implication here? What is the aim of this war? China, by containing
Mm.
China's hydrocarbon needs. China put an embargo on rare earth supplies to United States. So is this Trump administration's way of giving a lesson to China and try to contain China and impact its economy? So the real aim may be multifold. Maybe regime change in Iran, also controlling the oil supplies of Iran, but simultaneously giving a long term blow to China.
At the same time, financial market in Asia seem to be reacting very strongly. Look at the South Korean market, it falls sharply. So why are the Asian market taking such heavy hits from this crisis?
All the markets are taking a hard hit. Even in US, the stock markets, all the indices fell down.
Mm.
But stock markets sometimes react to an impulse, and these are short-term sort of, day-to-day fluctuations. But yes, South Korean economy is also integrated with the US economy. So yes, there will be impact on the stock markets, but that is like temporary fluctuation, day-to-day fluctuation. What I'm talking about is there will be long-term consequences of this war, whether it is South Korea, whether it is Japan, whether it is China, whether it is United States. I think if this war gets prolonged more than 30 days, we will probably have a recession set in. And at this time, Pentagon and the Secretary of Defense of United States has said that maybe it can go up to 8 weeks. These are high hopes. Once you start a war, things are not under your control. How long the war would last? You had a very neat surgical operation done in Venezuela that within 24 hours, Maduro was arrested, brought to United States. There was a caretaker government that you had already talks going on. There are some talks that there were, bribing done to Venezuelan officials or cabinet members. So this was the desired outcome. And there are talks that the same thing is happening in Iran, that the spy chief was compromised. And in fact, he left 20 minutes prior to bombing of Khamenei from the same meeting. And my understanding from open sources that he has been arrested by IRGC because they found it very unusual that 20 minutes before the bombing of that complex,
Mm.
this guy walked away saying that he is ill. What happens? This is a
Which guy?
standard tech.
Which guy
Pardon?
are you talking about?
The spy chief in
Okay,
Iran.
I see.
So he was compromised by Mossad and CIA. That is what is the allegation. And apparently IRGC has arrested him. Yet there are no takers in the Islamic Republic that is openly saying that, we will follow what United States directly. President Trump made announcement that IRGC and Iranian army and all these forces should surrender, save their lives, and get total immunity. What is the response? Nobody is buying that. Apparently, there are open source reports that Mossad agents are going around in Tehran giving suitcases full of cash to Islamic Republic of Regime's officials,
Mm.
asking them to surrender and flee and that kind of thing. So things are happening, and yet the war is continuing. That tells you that this war is not going to end so soon. In fact, the president of Iran has said that we will welcome ground invasion by the US troops uh, if they want to, if they have the fortitude, they should send their troops. And they are basically daring them to send the ground troops. So I don't see this war ending so soon. It's not Venezuela. Iran is not Venezuela. Venezuela was governed by left ideologies,
Yeah.
and these are Islamic zealots. You know, their basic, philosophy is that if they die, they go to heaven. They want to sacrifice themselves, so I don't see there will be immediate surrender.
But Iran's economy was already under turmoil before the war. How long they will be able to continue this?
I think this was a mistake to attack when there was civil unrest going on. In month of January, by various reports, there were civil protests and the regime, Islamic regime, had killed between 32,000 to 50,000 Iranian civilians.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when you have war? any war, any national crisis hardens the nationalistic sentiments.
Yes.
There's a phenomenon called rallying under the flag. So, if you look at Iranian people, there are three categories. One are hardcore supporters of the Islamic regime, these are the Islamic zealots. Second is people who are in opposition, who were carrying out the demonstrations. And third is a middle ground, you know, who are just civilians who are surviving. They are not part of the Islamic regime. Some of them may have their reservations about the Islamic regime, but they were not involved in these demonstrations. And I'm not talking about the diaspora. Diaspora is totally separate, their politics is separate. So there was this entrenched kind of civil protest. Women were, throwing away their burqas and chadors, and people were on the road. And Islamic regime was feeling targeted. Now, what happens when there's an external attack? And that external attack not only targets IRGC and the hierarchy, political hierarchy, they are actually attacking the infrastructure. I have seen reports, hospitals have been, you know, blown to smithereens. There was a girls' school in which 175 girls, these are like 10-year-old, 11-year-old girls, they were killed. What happens to the nationalistic sentiment? Yes, these people may be against the Ayatollah crazy, but when your country is being targeted like this, you cannot walk on the road, your hospitals have been destroyed, infrastructure is getting destroyed, people are dying. There are like almost 1,300 Iranians who have died in these attacks. So there will be hardening of nationalistic sentiment. And the choice is between the devil and the deep blue sea, or from frying pan to fire, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, both Israel and United States, although they claim to be the liberators of the Iranian people, they don't have very good reputation within Iran. If you talk to Iranian intellectuals, they still talk about 1953 CIA induced toppling of the Iranian prime minister who had nationalized the oil industry. So CIA had actually spent millions of dollars to topple him
Mm.
and brought Shah. Shah of Iran was a creation of CIA. And yes, he modernized Iran, he introduced education, women's rights were, guaranteed. They didn't go in chador and burqa and they were part, studying in universities, they were professionals. But there was something under Shah, and that was a despotic regime.
Mm.
And there was the secret service called SAVAK. So Iranian intellectuals, even if they are not allied with the Islamic regime, they still remember the persecution and atrocities committed by SAVAK, the secret police of the Shah of Iran, Raza Pahlavi. So, in other words, you have taken the emphasis from civil disturbance, civil, protests, demonstrations,
Mm.
non cooperation, and almost like, pitched battle on the streets between the morality police, the IRGC, and the people of Iran. Now all that has gone. And if the attackers are not considered in very good repute,
Uh, we have only 3 minutes of time left, so let me ask a couple of questions to you. The one question I have: at what point does this stop? What we see the temporary economic shock starts turning into something more serious, like global recession. So, what are the symptoms? What are the indications people should watch out for?
Global recession will depend upon how long this war continues. If the war continues more than 4 weeks, it's likely that there will be a global recession. World cannot be starved of its energy.
Hmm.
If the Brent crude prices go to $120 per barrel, there will be recession. There's no ifs and buts about it.
And in modern history, many major economic downturns have been triggered by energy shocks.
Hmm.
So, do you see any parallels between what's happening today and earlier crises like the oil shocks in 1970s?
Well, the 1970 oil shock, when OPEC as a cartel suddenly raised actually oil prices from $1 per barrel to prohibitive amounts,
Hmm.
it caused recession. So there will be recession because again, modern economy runs on energy. Hydrocarbons are very important part of it. It's good that country like India are now harnessing solar energy and non-fossil fuel energies because India does not have that much of fossil fuel energy and 85% of India's energy supplies come from abroad.
Hmm.
But if the crude oil prices go up to 120,
Hmm.
probably India will absorb the shock by buying more of Russian oil, which India gets on discounted level. But boy, it's going to lead to recession if the war gets prolonged. And I don't see much indications of war stopping short because both sides are taking very entrenched positions.
So, Dr. Adityanjee, this has been a very insightful conversation. What really stands out is how quickly geopolitics, energy, and economics are colliding in this crisis, and how events in one narrow waterway can ripple across the entire global economy. Thank you for joining us and helping us understand the bigger picture. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to Global Focus by Hari Sinha. In our next episode, we'll go deeper into the conflict and ask a very interesting question: who is actually winning and losing from the war? So stay tuned. If you have any question on your mind, please write in the comment. We'll be answering those questions. If you like the video, please share with your friends. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha. Pleasure to talk to you, but we are not looking at very optimistic scenario. Strait